Sand whispered across the tracks like a ghost's final breath. Moonlight carved shadows into the broken locomotive that sat dying in the New Mexico darkness. A iron beast bleeding steam into stars that watched without mercy. And there, beneath that machine's cold belly, lay a man who'd promised himself he'd never look up at hope again. Caleb Thorne worked alone, always alone. His calloused hands moved through the machinery with the certainty of a man who understood metal better than he'd ever understood people. Grease blackened his fingers. Sweat carved rivers through the dust on his face. The desert night pressed down with its familiar weight. That vast, crushing silence he'd learned to call home after the war had hollowed him out and left him for the buzzards. 3 years he'd been riding these rails. 3 years since he'd stopped believing in anything softer than gunmetal and harder than truth. The wind shifted. Caleb's hands stilled. Through the mechanical groaning of the wounded locomotive, another sound reached him, faint, desperate. A voice calling through the darkness like a prayer nobody would answer. Please, someone? Is anyone there? He crawled from beneath the engine, stood slowly. His lean frame unfolded against the moonlit desert, pistol already in his hand, instinct older than thought. The cry came again, trembling on the edge of surrender. 50 yards out, where the sand dunes rose like frozen waves, he found her. She knelt in the dirt, her traveling dress torn and dust-covered, dark hair falling wild around shoulders that shook with exhaustion. In her hands, clutched like scripture, she held a single envelope, its edges worn soft from constant touching. Ma'am. His voice came rough from disuse. She looked up. Even in the darkness, her eyes caught the starlight, green as creek water, bright with unshed tears and something fiercer. Something that made his chest tighten in a way he didn't want to name. My stagecoach, she gasped. It overturned. The driver's dead. I've been walking since sundown. Her voice cracked. I have to get to Silver Ridge. I have to. Silver Ridge is 40 miles northeast. Caleb's words came flat, final. Nothing but rattlesnakes and regret between here and there. Then I'll walk 40 miles. She struggled to stand, swayed. I didn't come 1,500 miles to stop now. He should have walked away. Should have returned to his engine, his solitude, his carefully constructed nothing. But something in the way she held that letter, like it contained every reason she had left to breathe, made him remember what it felt like to believe in something. What's in Silver Ridge worth dying for? He asked. Her fingers tightened on the envelope. A man named Thomas Brennan. We've been writing for 8 months. He asked me to come west, to marry him. This letter, her voice broke. This is the last one he sent. 3 weeks ago. I've read it so many times, the words are fading. A mail-order bride. Caleb's jaw tightened. He'd seen it before. Desperate men sending pretty lies across the miles to lonely women who deserved better than broken promises in a broken land. You ever met this Thomas Brennan face to face? No, but then you don't know him at all. Fire flashed in her eyes. You don't know anything about me or what I've survived to get here. Thomas's letters were kind when the world wasn't. They were hope when I had none. So yes, I'll walk 40 miles. I'll walk 400 if that's what it takes. She took 3 steps before her legs buckled. Caleb caught her before she hit the ground. She weighed almost nothing, all stubborn spirit wrapped in exhausted flesh. This close, he could see the hollow spaces beneath her cheekbones, the way her lips had cracked from thirst. When'd you last eat? He demanded. Yesterday. Maybe. Her words slurred. Doesn't matter. It matters. He lifted her easily, started walking toward the locomotive. Name. What? Your name. If you're gonna pass out in my arms, I should at least know what to call you. A ghost of a smile touched her lips. Elena. Elena Marquez. Caleb Thorne. He settled her against the locomotive's wheel. You try to walk off into that desert again, and the only thing that's going to find you is the coyotes. Understand? She nodded, too tired to fight. He brought water from his canteen, watched her drink with the carefulness of someone who'd known thirst. Then he pulled hardtack and dried beef from his saddlebag, rationing out portions while she ate in silence. The letter lay beside her, ghostly pale in the moonlight. What did he promise you? Caleb heard himself ask. This Thomas Brennan. Elena's fingers traced the envelope's edge. A home. A garden where roses could grow. Children, maybe, someday. A life that wasn't... She stopped, looked away. A life that wasn't what I left behind. And what was that? A place where hope died young and dreams went to rot. Her voice carried the weight of old wounds. My father drank himself to death. My mother followed 6 months later. I was working in a textile mill 14 hours a day, breathing cotton dust and watching girls my age turn gray before 30. Thomas's letters, they were the only light I had. Caleb understood that darkness. He'd lived in it too. I'll fix the locomotive by dawn, he said quietly. Get you to Silver Ridge. But Elena, he made her meet his eyes. Don't expect miracles. Men who order brides from catalogs, they're usually running from something, or toward something that ain't real. Maybe I am too, she whispered. The truth of it hung between them like smoke. First light painted the desert in shades of rust and gold. Caleb had worked through the night, his hands remembering the machinery's secrets while his mind kept circling back to the woman who slept curled against the locomotive's wheel, still clutching that letter even in dreams. When the engine finally roared to life, Elena woke with a start. Come on, Caleb said, offering his hand. We're burning daylight. The locomotive crawled northeast, black smoke trailing against a sky so blue it hurt to look at. Elena sat in the cab beside him, watching the desert unfold in waves of sage and sand. For miles, neither spoke. The silence felt different than the kind Caleb usually kept, less like armor, more like understanding. You ever believe in something that turned out to be a lie? She finally asked. Caleb's hands tightened on the controls. Yeah. What did you do? Stopped believing. He watched the horizon. Figured it was safer. Is it? Her green eyes found his. Safer? He didn't have an answer for that. Silver Ridge appeared at noon, a scatter of weathered buildings clinging to existence in the merciless sun. The town looked like it was losing a long battle with the desert, slowly being swallowed by the same nothing that surrounded it. Caleb brought the locomotive to a hissing stop at the edge of town. Thomas Brennan, he told the first man they met, a grizzled shopkeeper with suspicious eyes. You know him? The man spat tobacco juice. Knew him. Buried him 3 days ago. Elena's face went white as bone. Fever took him, the shopkeeper continued. Came on fast. Killed him faster. He was calling for someone named Elena at the end. Seemed real torn up about it. The letter fell from Elena's fingers, drifted to the dust, like a broken promise. Caleb caught her elbow as she swayed. Easy now. I came all this way. Her voice barely carried. I left everything. I traveled 1,500 miles for a man I never met, and he's... Tears finally spilled over, tracking clean lines through the dust on her face. I have nothing. No money. No family, no... You have more than you think. Caleb's words came fierce, urgent. You have courage. You have fire. You walked through the desert rather than quit. That counts for something. Does it? She looked at him with those creek-water eyes, and something cracked open in Caleb's chest, something he'd kept locked down since the war. What do I do now, Caleb? Where do I go? He should have said, back east. Home. Anywhere but here. Instead, he heard himself say, come with me. What? I've got work lined up in Santa Fe, 6 months of rail repair, steady pay. There's a boarding house there run by a widow named Martha who takes in women needing a fresh start. She'll give you a room, help you find work." He paused, the words catching in his throat. "And I'll check in on you. Make sure you're all right." "Why?" Elena searched his face. "Why would you do that for a stranger?" "Because you reminded me what it feels like to hope," he thought. "Because somewhere between the broken locomotive and this dying town, I stopped wanting to be alone." But what he said was, "Because you deserve better than this. Better than a dead man's dreams and a desert grave." Elena stood silent for a long moment, the wind pulling at her dark hair. Then, slowly, she bent and picked up the letter, folded it carefully and tucked it into her pocket like a prayer she wasn't quite ready to release. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay." They buried the letter that evening, just outside Silver Ridge where the sage grew thick. Not the paper itself, Elena kept that, but the dream it represented, the impossible promise, the life that was never going to be. Caleb helped her dig the hole while the sunset bled crimson across the sky. They didn't speak. Some griefs were too big for words. When it was done, Elena stood over the small mound of earth, her shoulders squared against the dying light. "Thank you, Thomas," she said softly, "for showing me there was something worth traveling toward, even if it wasn't what I expected." They rode toward Santa Fe as stars ignited overhead, the locomotive's rhythm steady as a heartbeat, the desert rolling past in shadows and silver light. Elena sat beside Caleb in the cab, her shoulder touching his, both of them watching the horizon. "What happens after Santa Fe?" she asked. "Don't know," Caleb admitted. "Never thought much past the next mile of track. Maybe it's time to start." He looked at her, at the strength in her profile, the way she held herself despite everything she'd lost. Something shifted in his chest, settling into place like a gear finding its groove. "Yeah," he said quietly. "Maybe it is." The locomotive carried them into the darkness, toward a city neither had called home yet, toward a future unwritten, toward something that felt, for the first time in 3 years, like possibility. Behind them, the desert kept its ancient silence. Ahead, the rails stretched on forever, 2 lines of steel running parallel toward whatever came next. Some promises were meant to break so better ones could form. Some distances had to be crossed alone before you could walk them together. And sometimes, the life you traveled 1,500 miles to find wasn't the one you were meant to discover. Sometimes, it was better. Thanks for staying to the end. Where are you watching from? Drop a comment, and don't forget to subscribe for more cinematic stories from the untamed frontier.